Albert Bandura's approach is known as the observational learning, indicating the importance in the learning process of observing other people's behavior. He disagreed with Skinner over the concept of reinforcement for each of our actions. Instead, he said we learn through vicarious reinforcement by observing the behavior of other people and the consequences of the behavior. Bandura also believed that our internal cognitive processes can influence observational learning. He meant was that we do not unintentionally follow the behaviors of others, instead we make a conscious decision to imitate someone else's behavior. His theory is based on rigorous laboratory research with normal people in social interaction rather than a rat in a cage or a neurotic person on a couch. Albert Bandura was born in Alberta in 1925. He was the youngest of 6 children. Both of his parents were immigrants from Eastern Europe. Dr. Bandura's father worked as a track layer for the Trans-Canada Railroad, while his mother worked in a general store before they were able to buy some land and become farmers. Though times were often hard growing up, Dr. Bandura's parents placed great emphasis on celebrating life and, more importantly, family. They were also very keen on their children doing well in school. Bandura studied in Mandare, which only had one school. So he did all of his schooling in one place. The school had very little resources, including teachers. Because of these limitations, most of the learning was self-directed on the student's part. Dr. Bandura learned a lot about value and importance of self-direction from this time in his life. After spending a summer working in Alaska after finishing high school, Dr. Bandura went to the University of British Columbia. He took an introductory psychology course because it fit into an early time slot, thus allowing him to work in the afternoon, and became hooked. He graduated 3 years in 1949 with the Balcon Award in Psychology. Dr. Bandura went to the University of Iowa to complete his graduate work. At the time, the University of Iowa was central to psychological study, especially in the area of social learning theory. Bandura completed his master's in 1951, followed by a PhD in clinical psychology in 1952. After completing his higher studies, Dr. Bandura went on to a postdoctoral position at the Wichita Guidance Center before accepting a position as a faculty member at Stanford University in 1953, where he is still today. Dr. Bandura found Stanford to be near perfect in its philosophy towards students and learning. Renowned colleagues, bright students, and good weather. While at Stanford, he has always felt able to pursue whatever research area he wanted. Dr. Bandura has studied many different topics over the years, including aggression, adolescence, children's abilities to self-regulate and self-reflect, and of course self-efficacy. Dr. Bandura is perhaps most famous for his Bobo Doll experiment in the 1950s. At the time, there was a popular belief that learning was a result of reinforcement. In the Bobo Doll experiment, Dr. Bandura presented children with social model of novel, violent behavior or non-violent behavior towards the inflatable, redounding Bobo Doll. The children who viewed the violent behavior were in turn violent towards the doll. The control group was rarely violent towards the doll. Dr. Bandura and his colleagues, Dory and Sheila Ross, showed that social modeling is a very effective way of learning. Dr. Bandura went on to incorporate social modeling into his views on social learning theory, which had a huge impact on psychology in the 1980s. Social learning theory focuses on what people learn from observing and interacting with other people.
Albert Bandura also talked about a phenomenon called disinhibition, which refers to the weakening of an inhibition or restraint through exposure to a model. The term disinhibition in general is used to refer to the lack of restraint manifested in disregard for social conventions, impulsivity, and poor risk assessment. Bandura's research showed that certain behaviors which a person usually suppresses or inhibits may be performed more readily under the influence of a model. Disinhibition can occur with respect to activities that are beneficial and positive or harmful and negative. Examples of positive type of disinhibition can include performing a dance in front of people or even standing up for a cause after you watch a model do it. Examples of negative type of disinhibition include mob behavior, rioting, etc. Posting comments online following the example or model of others offer the same anonymity as being in a large crowd. So, other negative examples of the disinhibition effect are cyberbullying and trolling. In cyberbullying, individuals taunt and humiliate a third person while remaining safely hidden behind the anonymity provided by the internet.
Okay, so Bandura and his associates investigated three factors found to influence modeling. The characteristics of the models, the characteristics of the observer, and the reward consequences associated with the behavior. The characteristics of the model affect our tendency to initiate them in real life. We may be more influenced by someone who appears to be similar to us, by someone who differs from us in obvious and significant ways. In the laboratory, Bandura found that although children initiated the behavior of a child, model in the same room, a child in a film and filmed in a cartoon character, the extent of modeling decreased as the similarities between the model and the object decreased. Okay, the reward of consequences associated with the behavior, the reward of consequences linked to a particular behavior can affect the extent of modeling and even override the impact of models. And observer characteristics. A high status model may lead to imitate a certain behavior, but if the reward and are not meaningful to us, we will discontinue the behavior and be less likely to be influenced by the model in future. Characteristics of the observer. The attribute of the observer also determine the effectiveness and observational learning. People who are low in self-confidence and self-esteem are much more likely to imitate a model's behavior than people high in self-confidence and self-esteem. Thank you.
Now, let's take a look at the processes of observational learning. Albert Bandura analyzed the nature of observational learning and found it to be governed by four related mechanisms, namely attention, retention, production, incentive, and motivation. Let's try understanding this concept with the help of a real-life example. The first process involved in observational learning is attention. Observational learning or modeling will not occur unless the subject is actually paying attention to the model. Also, merely exposing the subject to the model does not guarantee that the subject will be attentive to the relevant cues and stimulus events or even perceive the situation accurately. Thus, it is important that the subject must perceive the model accurately enough to acquire the information necessary to imitate the model's behavior. The second process involved in observational learning is retention. Merely paying attention to the model is not enough to learn the behavior. The subject must be able to remember significant aspects of the model's behavior in order to repeat it later. This can be carried out in two ways, through an imaginal internal representational system or through a verbal system. In the imaginal system, we form mental images that are easily retrievable while observing the model's behavior. On the other hand, the verbal representational system involves a verbal coding of the behavior we have observed. For example, we might talk ourselves through the steps in a complicated task while mentally rehearsing the sequence of behaviors we will perform later. Thus, when we wish to perform the action, the verbal code will provide hints, reminders, and cues. The third process involved in observational learning is production. Translating mental and verbal representations into overt behavior requires the production process. Why there is such a big difference in the subject's expectation of a performance compared to how she actually performed in reality is because although she may have attended to, retained, and rehearsed symbolic representations of the model's behavior, her observations were not sufficient enough to ensure immediate and skilled performance of the actions. Thus, vigorous practice and feedback is needed to produce smooth performance of the behavior. The fourth process involved in observational learning is incentive and motivation. Whether we choose to attend or retain or actually perform a behavior, all of this depends on whether or not we have an incentive or motivation process. So, incentives actually influence the attention and retention process because if you don't have an incentive, you may not pay as much attention, right? And when you don't pay as much attention, you may end up retaining very less in the process. Our incentive to learn is influenced by our anticipation of the reinforcement or punishment for doing so. So, what this means is that assume you are looking at a model's behavior producing a certain reward or avoiding a punishment. Now, that can serve as a very strong incentive for us to pay attention to, remember, and perform a behavior correctly, right? So, the reinforcement is experienced vicariously during our observation of the model, right? Now, let's go by the example we've been using throughout this video, right? If the model is dancing and fellow classmates or students come and praise the model and the observer sees this, now this serves as a major motivation, as a major incentive for the observer because she would feel that if she performed the same behavior, she would be rewarded in the same way, she would get the same amount of praise, right? Now, it's also important to note that reinforcement is not required for learning to occur. So, reinforcement can actually facilitate learning, but it is not a requirement for learning to occur because there are many factors other than the reward consequences of the behavior that determine what we attend to, retain, and rehearse. For example, think of an exciting video, right? It may capture our interest even though it doesn't actually we don't actually receive any sort of reinforcement when you watch a exciting video or you listen to a very loud sound or bright lights for that matter, but there are other factors that influence what we attend to retain and rehearse. So reinforcement can facilitate learning, but it is not a requirement for learning to occur.
Hi, I'm going to be talking about self-reinforcement and self-efficacy. In Bandura's approach to personality, the two important aspects of the self are self-reinforcement and self-efficacy. So what is self-reinforcement? Administering rewards or punishments to oneself for meeting, exceeding, or falling short of one's own expectations or standards is called self-reinforcement. It is as important as reinforcement administered by others. Self-administered reinforcement can be as tangible, such as a new pair of gym shoes or a car, or it can be as emotional as pride or satisfaction from a job well done. Self-administered punishment can be expressed in shame, guilt, or depression about not behaving the way we wanted to. Now, what is self-efficacy? How well we meet our behavioral standards determines our self-efficacy. In Bandura's system, self-efficacy refers to feelings of adequacy, efficiency, and competence in coping with life. Meeting and maintaining our performance standards enhances self-efficacy. Failure to meet and maintain them reduces it. Now, people low in self-efficacy feel helpless, unable to exercise control over life events. Low self-efficacy can destroy motivation, lower aspirations, interfere with cognitive abilities, and adversely affect physical health. Now, people high in self-efficacy believe they can deal effectively with events and situations. High self-efficacy reduces fear of failure, raises aspirations, and improves problem-solving and analytical thinking abilities. Now, our judgment about our self-efficacy is based on 4 sources of information: performance attainment, vicarious experiences, verbal persuasion, and physiological and emotional arousal. The most influential source of efficacy judgments is performance attainment. Prior achievements demonstrate our capabilities and strengthen our feelings of self-efficacy. Prior failures, particularly repeated failures in childhood, lower self-efficacy. Vicarious experiences, that is, seeing other people perform successfully, strengthen self-efficacy, particularly if the people we observe are similar in abilities. In effect, we are saying, if they can do it, so can I. In contrast, seeing others fail can lower self-efficacy. It's like saying, if they can do it, neither can I. Number 3, verbal persuasion, which means reminding people that they possess the ability to achieve whatever they want to achieve, can enhance self-efficacy. This may be the most common of the 4 informational sources, and one frequently offered by our parents, teachers, spouses, our coaches, our friends, and therapists, who say in effect, you can do it. The 4th source of information about self-efficacy is physiological and emotional arousal. How fearful or calm do we feel in a stressful situation? The more composed we feel, the greater our self-efficacy. Whereas the higher our level of physiological and emotional arousal, the lower our self-efficacy. The more fear, anxiety, or tension we experience in a given situation, the less we feel able to cope. Thank you.
Albert Bandura's modeling theory till now was used to learn behaviors. But now let's see how it can be used to relearn or change behavior. Are you scared of dogs, snakes, spiders, or people? Do you suffer from rapid heartbeats, shortness of breath, nausea when you encounter one of the above? If yes, then you have a fear towards these objects, situations, or animals. People with phobia tend to be low on self-efficacy and self-confidence. Thus, by eliminating their fear or phobia, we can alter their personal and work habits. Modeling techniques can be used to eliminate fears and other intense emotional reactions. There are two types of modeling therapy. The first one is called guided participation. Guided participation is the one in which the subject watches a live model and then participates with the model. For example, you observe a man petting a dog. Then you are coaxed into touching the dog. Eventually, you are told to hug or hold the dog. The second type of modeling therapy is called covert modeling. In covert modeling, a subject is instructed to imagine a model coping with a feared or threatening situation. This technique is used in the absence of an observable model. This technique is used to treat snake phobias and social inhibition. Now that we've seen the two techniques of modeling therapy, we can see that modeling therapy in turn boosts self-efficacy and self-confidence. Modeling therapy using video techniques is the most practical method available. Why so? Well, firstly, videos can be edited to show the particular scene. Second, they can be stopped when the intensity is too much to handle for the subject. And third, it's the most cost-effective and less time-consuming method available. Now we have seen how the two techniques of modeling therapy were helpful in treating fears and phobias. Research has shown this therapy to be effective in treating phobias, obsessive-compulsive disorders, and sexual dysfunctions. Considerable research has been conducted on self-efficacy during and after behavior modification therapy. The results have shown that as the subject's self-efficacy improved during treatment, they were increasingly able to deal with the source of the fear. It was the therapeutic procedure itself that enhanced self-efficacy. Thus, now we have seen how Albert Bandura's modeling therapy can be used to treat fears and phobias.
Behavior modification using the modeling approach can also be used to reduce anxiety. Anxiety, whether pathological or non-pathological, can create difficulties in functioning. In case of non-pathological anxiety, social learning can play a role in creating or decreasing this anxiety. One such example is of when people are prevented from receiving medical treatment due to intense fear or anxiety about medical situations or hospitals. An early study by Melamed and Segal explored the relationship between social learning and levels of anxiety. In this study, children who were scheduled for surgery and had never been in a hospital before were divided into two groups: an experimental group that watched a film about a boy's positive experiences in the hospital, and a control group that saw a film about a boy taking a trip. Subsequent assessments of the children's anxiety levels, both before and after surgery, showed an overall drop in anxiety levels for children in the experimental group. These results showed that modeling had been effective in reducing their anxiety. Similar procedures have been used to reduce fear of hospitalization in adults as well.